Now, today's subject is an introduction to Vedic literature. Some of you who are familiar with Vedanta philosophy may have some questions, some doubts and ideas arising in our minds as to what is the relationship between Vedanta and Vedas. Well, at the very outset, I would like to make this statement. Vedas constitute the origin and the original source of Vedanta philosophy. Most of you are familiar with the word Vedanta. In fact, the very meaning of Vedanta is the essence of the Vedas, the gist of the Vedas, or the final word, the conclusions of the Vedas. Vedanam antaha. The word anta is the word, Sanskrit word. It means the inner essence, the gist, a brief summary. The other meaning is the final conclusion. So, Vedanta is nothing but the final conclusion, the philosophical, spiritual conclusion of Vedic literature. This is how we relate Vedanta with Vedas. The word Veda itself originates from a Sanskrit root, which actually means knowledge. With is the original root from which the word Veda originates. Knowledge of what? Opinions differ as to what exactly is the implication of the knowledge expounded in Vedic literature. There are different views, different interpretations. Those who believe that life in this world is all that we have to worry about. Those who believe that the human pursuit consists of efforts for acquiring physical comforts in this world and extended physical comforts in heaven. For people who hold this view, Vedas means the pursuit of knowledge will help us to lead a very happy life in this world. In fact, this view was held by a school of thought in ancient India, which was very prominent, which was the prevailing thought current and philosophy of life when Buddha was born, around 560 BC. That means 560 years before Jesus Christ was born. This was the prevailing philosophy of life in India. Of course, the higher Vedantic ideals were prevalent among certain exalted, enlightened classes. But the prevailing philosophy of life was based on this idea. Life means life in this world. And an extension of worldly pleasures in afterlife, that is in heaven, that's all. So they interpreted Vedas in a very limited, narrow language. So they said, Sruyade dharma anaya iti srutihi, amnayate ubudishyate dharma anena iti amnayaka. These are the two famous definitions put forward by this school of thought. It's called the Mimamsakas. Mimamsakas were mostly ritualists. They believed in performing certain rituals. These rituals, in some respects, resemble the religious rituals which were prevalent among the Jewish priestly classes when Jesus was born. There are some similarities according to historians and anthropologists, the Pharisees and Sadducees. Some of the religious rituals which were prevalent during pre-Christian era among the Jewish priestcraft closely resembled some parallel rituals and customs prevailing among these Mimamsakas. So they said, well, Vedas means the source of a philosophy of life. Dharma here means something that helps you to acquire physical comforts and helps you to enjoy those physical comforts in a very intelligent, highly organized manner. Because even to enjoy physical comforts, you need to follow certain disciplines, certain etiquette, certain customs, and you have to believe in certain social structure, social discipline. That's what they meant by the word dharma. Amnayade upadishyade dharmanainati amnayeha. So amnayeha is the one word used as a synonym of the Vedas by these Mimamsakas. Now we are not concerned with that, of course. We are concerned with the relation of Vedas with Vedanta. Now, according to the greatest of Advaitic philosophers, Adi Shankaracharya, Vedas, the word with dhatu, from which the word Vedas originates, means supreme knowledge, knowledge of the transcendental reality. Not anything related to acquiring physical comforts in this world. So, Brahmadhinam Paramatmanam Labhanda iti Veda. Shankaracharya has defined the word Veda in one of his bhashyas, most probably in Sanasujadiya Bhashya, one of the unimportant works. It's very important because of Shankaracharya's masterly touch. But then these bhashyas, commentaries are not as important as his commentaries on the Upanishads, Gita or Brahma Sutras. So there he defines Vedas as something which elevates you from the normal pursuit of empirical comforts. Now, this with regard to Vedas. Most of you know, at least some of you, there have been 4 different categories into which the original Veda was divided. I am using this term with a special meaning because according to traditional Orthodox circles, there was only one Veda. This Veda was taught to Vyasa, the great compiler, the author of the Puranas. And Vyasa classified this one Veda, which was a huge body of literature. When we use the word literature, we have to be careful. Vedas had not taken a definite written form during those days. You have to remember, the original and the most ancient of the Vedic literature, namely the Rigveda Samhita, is in fact not in literary form. It is written in some kind of a spoken language. It was a kind of Vedic vernacular. In fact, it did not follow a definite, well-structured school of grammar. It is highly fluid, highly flexible. It's an intermixture of prose and poetry. Poetry not following a definite meter or prosody or anything. It's a freelance writing, it's called. So that's just as a information, we have to keep this in mind at the beginning. So what Vyasa did was, he edited the entire Vedic literature into 4 different categories. And he taught each of these to one of his 4 prominent disciples. This is how Vedas originate. So it is very interesting for historians and linguists and also anthropologists and historians and philosophers to have an idea of how the great philosophical system which Swami Vivekananda brought to America in 1893, how it gradually evolved over thousands of years, not centuries. So Vyasa edited this one Vedic structure into 4 classes, 4 categories. Each of this category was called Rigveda, Yajurveda, Samaveda and Atharvaveda, which most of you know, 4 Vedas. And he taught each of these 4 to one of his 4 prominent disciples. For those who are interested, Rigveda he taught to his disciple Paila, Yajurveda he taught to Vaishambhayana, and Samaveda he taught to Jaimini, and Atharvaveda he taught to another of his disciples, namely Sumantu. This is how the one Veda came to be divided into 4 Vedas. When you study the Upanishads, for example, many of you read the Upanishads, Brihadaranyaka, Chandogya, Kathopanishad and all on. It is interesting to relate how these Upanishads are related to, associated with each of these 4 Vedas. For example, those of you study Kathopanishads. Kathopanishad is actually related to one of the 2 subcategories of Yajurveda tradition. As I said earlier, Vyasa taught Yajurveda to Vaishambhayana. And Vaishambhayana carried on one aspect of Yajurveda, which is called Krishna Yajurveda. Krishna means black in according to dictionaries, but Krishna also can mean somewhat disorganized. Perhaps it's better to say not so well organized. That would be a kinder term to use. So, he taught Yajurveda to Vaishambhayana. And it so happened that he had one of his prominent disciples. Among his disciples, there was a very prominent, brilliant man. His name was Yajnavalkya. Yajnavalkya somehow happened to have a difference of opinion with his teacher. And he left the place and he had to leave behind him all that he was taught by his teacher, Vaishambhayana. And then this Yajnavalkya later prayed to sun god, Surya. And Surya blessed him with wisdom. So Yajnavalkya himself formulated another branch of Yajurveda. So the Kathopanishad which you study is related to Krishna Yajurveda, which was originally written by Vaishambhayana, who was taught by Vyasa. On the other hand, Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, it was revealed to Yajnavalkya by the sun god. So it doesn't really belong to Vaishambhayana tradition. I'm just giving an example, trying to relate the Upanishad literature, some of you may be familiar with. Well, I shall just give a glimpse of the effect, the impact of Vedic literature on human society today. Today we know very well that all enlightened, educated people, refined people, accept that there is truth in all religions. Either you reject religion in toto, you say, I don't believe in dogmatic religions. Or, if you are an enlightened person, you believe, well, I don't believe in any kind of dogmatic religion. I believe that all religions speak the same truth. Maybe the language they use may be different. Do you know where we got this idea? Well, some of you those of you who have read complete works of Swami Vivekananda or the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, would tell me that Swamiji brought this idea to Western world. Swamiji said, see, our goal is to reach a stage where all religions are true. And Sri Ramakrishna said, each religion is an equally valid path leading to the supreme goal. There is no such thing as a wrong religion. Every religion is an equally valid, rational path which takes you to the supreme goal. This is accepted by most of the great prominent intellectuals of modern times. I shall just quote a few examples. You know what Henry David Thoreau says? Whenever I have read any part of the Vedas, I have felt that some unearthly and unknown light illuminated me. These are the words of Henry Thoreau. In the great teachings of the Vedas, there is no touch of sectarianism or dogmatism. It is of all ages, climes, and nationalities, and it is the royal road for the attainment of the great knowledge, G and K capital letters. Annie Besant, who was the founder, founder was Blavatsky, Colonel Olcott, but she was the most prominent exponent of theosophical movements. The religion based on the Vedas, the Sanatana Dharma or Vedic Dharma, is the oldest of living religions and stands unrivaled in the depth and splendor of its philosophy. The more it is studied and practiced, the more does it illuminate the intellect and satisfy the heart. It illumines the intellect and satisfies the heart. I shall give an idea of which part of the Vedas inspired these great thinkers to speak in these terms. And Schopenhauer says, the Vedas are the most rewarding and the most elevating book which can be possible in the world. Schopenhauer statements. Now, in Rigveda Samhita, there is a famous statement, Indram Mitram Varunam Agni Rahu Atho Divyasa Suparno Garutman Ekam Sat Vipraha Bagudha Vadanti Agnim Yamam Matarishwanamahu. You can see the effect, the impact of this Vedic statement, which must have originated at least 6000 BC, in 6000 BC, how it influenced and still influences the thinking of any refined, broad-minded modern thinker, like Thoreau, Annie Besant, or Schopenhauer. This Vedic statement, which I quoted, means Indram Mitram Varunam Agni Rahu Atho Divyasa Suparno Garutman. The first part says, Indra, Mitra, Agni, Varuna. All these are different names, different synonyms that enlightened people use to call the one supreme reality. Ekam Sat Vipraha Bagudha Vadanti. Vipraha means enlightened people, refined people, educated people. They use these various terms. In modern language, we can say whether it is Jehovah, whether it is God, Father in heaven, or Vishnu, Shiva, any God for that matter. Any term that a well-refined man uses to call the supreme reality is a term which actually refers to one reality. Ekam Sat Vipraha Bagudha Vadanti. It comes in the first mandala of Rigveda Samhita, 164th verse. Now, it was this idea that you find expounded in graphic style throughout the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. When Sri Ramakrishna uses the simile, water is called water by somebody who speaks English language, is called Jalam by another person who uses Sanskrit, and so on. Whatever language you may be using, still you are implying the same reality. This is the meaning of Rigveda Samhita. This is the message of Rigveda Samhita. So, I already explained that there was only one Veda which Vyasa classified into 4 and taught each of these to one of his 4 disciples. Now, generally, each of these 4 Vedas is divided into 4 groups. The first one is, it consists of hymns, songs in praise of different deities, which is called Samhita or Brahmana, meaning the same. These hymns were used by ancient Indo-Aryans when they performed Vedic rituals. These hymns were used. One interesting point that is important to remember is there was no image worship and there was no temple worship during the Vedic age. Vedas never speak of temples or images. Vedas speak of different natural phenomena and try to find out if there is a supreme truth behind all this. So you find 5 or 6 levels of evolution in the concept of God in Rigveda Samhita. And in the beginning I must tell you, I am here going to deal with Rigveda Samhita. One reason is Rigveda Samhita is the oldest of Vedic literature. And that way it is the oldest of, oldest available religious spiritual literature in the world. Second point is, most of the mantras, most of the contents of the other Vedas are somewhat repetitions of whatever have been stated in Rigveda Samhita, except some portions. Samaveda, for example, almost 93% of the hymns in Samaveda Samhita comes from Rigveda Samhita. And many of the important hymns that you find in Yajurveda and Atharvaveda are also found in Rigveda Samhita. So, whenever great thinkers, especially modern Indologists, try to study the Vedas, they give importance to Rigveda Samhita because of its antiquity and because one way or other, most of the mantras found in the other 3 Vedas are related to Rigveda Samhita, if not exact repetitions of them. That's all. So, I want to confine myself to Rigveda Samhita. So, the 4 Vedas, and each of the Vedas divided into Samhita or Brahmana, Aranyaka and Upanishad. The Samhita contains hymns, praises, in praise of deities, different gods and goddesses. And Brahmana contains important information related to the actual performance of Vedic sacrifices and Vedic rituals. And Aranyaka contains some hymns which were generally practiced, taught, memorized and practiced by people who wanted to lead a contemplative life after their normal life in society. And Upanishads consist of the highest metaphysical and spiritual ideas related to man's inquiry into the real truth behind existence, the purpose of human life, and so on. Most of the spiritual, metaphysical and ontological ideas are contained in the Upanishadic part of the literature. And this is also related to 4 levels, 4 stages of social life. That is also very interesting from a sociological point of view. Vedic society believed in 4 stages of human life. So, when you are young, you have to study the Vedas. You have to study those scriptures which help you later on to lead the life of an ideal householder. So in the Taittiriya Upanishad, some of you study Vedamanuchya, Acharya, Handevasana, Manushasti, etc. You find this. There you find 4 important instructions given to a young man who is going to marry, and how it is related to the ideal of a stable social married life. See, Madrudevo Bhava, Pitrudevo Bhava, Acharya Devo Bhava, Adithi Devo Bhava. It is the duty of children to respect and honor their parents as much as they respect and honor God Himself. And also not only parents, but also the guests and their teacher. So, your relationship with your parents, your hospitality towards your guests, and also your sense of reverence and obligation to the teacher who gives you spiritual wisdom. And in one of in fact, this comes in a convocation address. It is part of a convocation address. It comes in Taittiriya Upanishad, which belongs to Krishna Yajurveda. It begins like this. A young man, after completing his education in the hermitage, where he has studied for 12 years, studying not only the Vedas, but also all the disciplines, arts, branches of learning, which will help him to lead a happy, responsible married life. It says, so he should look after his parents properly, and he should look after his children in such a way that when the children will grow up, they will not dump him in an old age home. So both ways you find. It works in both ways. Children have to respect their parents, and parents have to bring up their children in such a way, not only giving physical food and physical comforts, but also giving spiritual food. So that these children, when they grow up, will look after their parents. So, Deva Pitrgarya Abhyam na Pramadidavyam Matrudevo Bhava. Such ideas you find in the Rigveda Samhita. Satyam Vada Dharmam Chara, Satyana Pramadidavyam, Dharmana Pramadidavyam. The highest ethical principles, you should speak the truth, you should practice righteousness, you should never deviate from the truth, and you should never deviate from the ideal of righteousness. So how a very harmonious concept of life was prevalent during the Vedic age. So because there is a misunderstanding among many that Vedanta and Vedic way of life were mostly concerned with life after death. But it is not so. Vedas present a very solid, practical, not only idealistic, very realistic and pragmatic scheme of human life. Now, coming back to the Vedic structure, I said, Vedas are 4 in number. Each of the 4 Vedas divided into Samhita, Brahmana. Samhita consists of hymns studied by those who are getting ready to join social life. Brahmanas consist of teachings and instructions related to the actual performance of Vedic sacrifices. And Aranyaka, as I said, deals with certain hymns, consists of certain hymns which are recited by householders who should retire to a lonely place after leading a busy social life in this world. So Manusmriti, which actually gives an outline of how Vedic scheme of life should be actually practiced in society. Manusmriti says, Grihasthasu yada pashed vali palidam atmanaha apattisya apatyam tada aranyam samasayed. The mantra meaning is this. What should an householder do? He has studied the Vedas and he has led a very responsible householder's life. He has looked after his parents and he also has brought up children in a responsible way. So whenever his hair becomes grey and whenever his face becomes wrinkled, he should take to forest. That's literal meaning. Means he should retire and lead a contemplative life with his wife. That is also insisted in the Smriti literature. With his wife, he should retire to a lonely place. Well, it could be a place of worship, it could be a lonely place, or it could be a room in his own house where he should lead a contemplative life, reading spiritual literature, not interfering in the affairs of the children at every stage so that he becomes a thorn in the household affairs. He should, or rather they, the old father and old mother, should retire to a lonely place where they should lead a contemplative life, getting ready for leaving this world with a smile on their face. That's what Veda says. And Upanishads, of course, it deal with the highest metaphysical, spiritual, and ontological questions. What is the meaning of all the high Vedantic ideas which you are familiar with by reading Swamiji's complete works of Swami Vivekananda? They all come from the Upanishads. So I won't go into details related to this. Now, how do we understand the true meaning of Vedic statements? As I said, Vedas are clothed in a language which is entirely different from the Sanskrit language that we normally study today. In fact, Vedas originated, they took literary form at least 2,000 years before, minimum 2,000 years before the standardization of Sanskrit language, which actually took place around 700 BC. That was the time when Panini wrote Ashtadhyayi, which is the Bible of modern Sanskrit. So, and Vedic statements, Vedic hymns do not follow many of the rules which Panini, the great grammarian of Sanskrit language, laid out in the later years. So I said it's in a kind of spoken, highly fluid, highly flexible language. I can give many examples, but we have a very limited time. For example, many of the grammatical ideas that you find in Chomsky's modern interpretations of language, you can find in the ancient Vedic Sanskrit grammar. The meaning of a word, the contextual interpretation of meaning of the word. So meaning of the word can and must differ depending upon the context, depending upon the speaker, depending upon so many other factors. All these ideas are laid out in the old Vedic grammatical books you find. Anyway, I am going to do that. That will take us to a more intricate branch of Vedic, what is called, the Vedangas, 6 limbs of the Vedas. To understand the true meaning of Vedic statements, the ancient sages developed 6 branches of learning, which are called the limbs of Vedas. It's called Vedanga, which are 6 in number. 6 are phonetics, elaborate systems. Remember, it is said that there are 11,000 books directly related to proper interpretation of Vedas and Vedic branches of learning. So there are 6 limbs of Vedic learning which help you to get the proper meaning, to understand the proper meaning of Vedic statements. The first one is a huge branch of learning which is called Shiksha. Shiksha is nothing but phonetics. We in English language got standardization, phonetical standardization only, which with the works of British English, Daniel Jones in 20th century, early decades of 20th century. Hornby, Fowler, Daniel Jones, Jimson and others. Just imagine. Vedic language got a phonetics, a full-fledged developed branches of learning called phonetics almost around 2000 BC. It's called Shiksha. The second branch is called Kalpa. Kalpa actually means the interpretation of Vedic statements in relation to actual human life. These are technical things which may not, but I shall just brush over this. I shall come to some of the topics which are more related to our life in today's world. Second one is Kalpa. Then third one is Vyakarana, means grammar. Highly fluid, not well standardized as modern Sanskrit grammar became. So Shiksha, Kalpa, Vyakarana. Then this Nirukta means etymology. Yaska's Nirukta, which was written around 1400 BC. And then books on astrology, which is called Jyotisha, and books on prosody. These are the 6 Vedangas. And in addition to that, there were also 4 subsidiary branches of Vedas, called Upavedas. It's called Upavedas. They call Ayurveda, Dhanurveda. In fact, Ayurveda developed as a part of, today you come across Ayurvedic medicine. Ayurveda is actually one of the subsidiary branches of Vedic learning. So Ayurveda, Dhanurveda, which are mostly related to martial arts, Arthashastra, socio-economic life, and then music. All these originate as part of the subsidiary branches of Vedas. So this much. Now I am coming to some important aspects related to the Vedic scheme of life, of social life during the Vedic times. If you read the Rigveda Samhita, you come across a structure of social life, a philosophy of social life, which is a happy blending of the best of the world, best of this world, and the best of the other world. In other ways, how to lead a happy life in this world, perceiving the path of physical comforts, prosperity, but without deviating from the principles of dharma, righteousness, and how this harmonious scheme of life leads a spiritual seeker to the transcendental plane. So a happy synthesis of the empirical and the trans-empirical. That's what you find in Vedic scheme of life. We have to live in this world. We have to procure those things which are necessary for meeting the demands, fulfilling the demands of modern life. For that, people need wealth. They need all the instruments, all the tools which are necessary for leading a happy life in this world. But the Vedic sages insisted, in your pursuit of physical comforts, which they termed artha and kama, in your pursuit of physical comforts, worldly comforts, you should not deviate from the path of certain important ethical and moral values, which they termed as dharma. So one should not deviate from the path of dharma in his or her pursuit of worldly comforts. And when a person leads a happy life in this world, enjoying the best of this world, but without deviating from the path of dharma, the path of righteousness, he reaches a stage when he realizes that the path of physical comforts is limited. It won't take him to the highest spiritual goal. So a stage is reached when you realize that there is something beyond this world, something beyond the present, beyond the visible, beyond the empirical. And that great supreme value was termed as moksha. Moksha means liberation from the shackles of worldly life. Worldly life was not termed as something bad or something to be avoided, something to be escaped from. No. In fact, Swami Vivekananda's statement we find, Worldly comforts, all these things are necessary, but they are not eternal. They cannot bring you eternal peace of mind, as any educated person living in modern world will affirm. So the world is only a relative entity. It's called Jagat Mithya. But then we can live in this world, we can make use of our activities in this world for our good and also for the good of the world. So world is a gymnasium for us to work out of the karmas. Swamiji says the statement. Need not run away from the world. Live in this world. Make use of this world. As a physical artist makes use of the gymnasium to get physical strength and health. Similarly, you live in this world. But while enjoying this world, remember, this enjoyment is not everlasting. But this stage, this realization comes only if you live a life without deviating from the path of the fundamental ethical values. That means the fundamental values of dharma. And when you live in this world, enjoying this world, upholding dharma, a time comes when you realize that there is something beyond this world, which they called liberation or moksha. So a Vedic scheme of life is a happy, harmonious blending, synthesis of dharma, artha, kama and moksha. These are the four supreme values which defined Vedic scheme of life, which is a very compact, harmonious blending of all that a person needs in this world. Live in this world, but lead a happy and harmonious life, and at the same time do not deviate from the path of dharma. This is the idea which Sri Krishna refers to in the Gita. Imam vivasade yogam proktavanaham avvayam vivaswan manave praha manu ikshagave abravit evam parambara pratam imam rajashayo viduhu. You find this here in the Gita, in the 4th chapter. Lord Krishna says, this Vedic scheme of life was familiar to ancient people, enlightened people of ancient times, whom Krishna called Rajashayaka, means they were rishis in the sense they had the ability to see beyond the empirical, beyond the phenomenal. At the same time, they kept themselves active. They remained active, performing the duties and responsibilities in this world. In fact, this harmonious Vedic scheme of life was best illustrated by a great poet of ancient India who lived in 2nd or 3rd century AD. He is supposed to be one of the greatest poets of the world. His name is Kalidasa. He wrote a number of plays and poetical works. One of his famous poetical works was Raghuvamsha. It is in fact a description of a series of kings belonging to the Solar dynasty. But that's not the point I'm driving home. There, Kalidasa gives a graphic description of Vedic scheme of life. So there he says, Shaisave abhyasta vidyanam yavvane visheshinam vardhake munivurtinam yogena ande tanutyajam. That's how Kalidasa concludes. In ancient times, people studied when they were young. They enjoyed this world they studied when they were very young. Shaisave means when their childhood, boyhood. And when they grew young, they lived in this world, they worked, but they never deviated from the path of dharma, moral and ethical values. And these moral and ethical values consisted of satya, means truthfulness, duty consciousness, respect for the parents, respect for teachers, respect for guests, and also a responsible way of bringing up their own children so that they will also continue the same cultural lineage. And then when they got old, when they became old, they led a contemplative, spiritually introspective life. And then with a smile in their face, they could leave this body. Yogena ande tanutyajam. Literal meaning is through yoga, they left this body. That's literal meaning, which means they practiced meditation, contemplation, and they were completely, they mentally separated themselves from the worldly pressures. When they became old, they led a happy, but at the same time contemplative life, away from the maddening world. That's what Kalidasa says. This is the essence of Vedic scheme of life. So these four values, dharma, artha, kama and moksha. If anyone follows only the path of artha and kama and physical comforts, without deviating, if anyone follows the path of physical comforts, deviating from the path of dharma, moral or ethical values, what happens? He will or she will think that physical comforts constitute the end, the goal supreme goal of human life. That's what really happens. If we follow the pursuit of physical comforts without deviating, upholding the path of dharma, you will realize there is something beyond the empirical, the physical world, the worldly pleasures. But if you deviate from the path of dharma, what happens? These physical comforts themselves will be the supreme goal of human existence. And that creates all problems. Problems for oneself, problems for others. That's what the Vedic sages said. So they in a very scientific manner, they chalked out these four values as the guiding principles of human life. Now, what about the transcendental? In Veda, if you read Rigveda Samhita, which is divided into 10 mandalas, 10 broad divisions. Broad division is something like a chapter, we can say. 10 mandalas. And which consists of 1029 suktas. Suktas means, say, some series of couplets. There are some suktas which have more than 190 suktas. The last one which you read, Aigamityak Sukta, says Sangajidhum Samvadadhum, that's how Rigveda Samhita ends. The last one, the last sukta, 190th sukta of the 10th mandala. Now, the entire Rigveda Samhita is divided into 10 mandalas. Each mandala is divided into different suktas. Each sukta is divided into verses. These verses are called rig. Altogether there are 10,027 rigs divided into nearly 1,000 odd suktas, and again the whole thing divided into 10 broad divisions called mandalas. This is this body of Rigveda Samhita. Now, in this Rigveda Samhita, there are a number of deities mentioned, number of gods. See the evolution of the concept of the ultimate reality in Rigveda Samhita. It has been subjected to study by scores of scholars, mostly German scholars, German and a few British scholars in the 19th and 20th centuries. Of course, in Indian tradition, they memorize the studies, the whole thing is memorized for them. They don't use modern techniques, modern research methodology in analyzing the evolution. It's a technique they evolved when they started studying the ancient Greek classics like Homer's Iliad and all that. Now, according to modern thinkers, there are 6 stages in the evolution of the ultimate reality. Put in other language, concept of God in Rigveda Samhita. You find a number of Vedic hymns which speak of the different natural phenomena like rivers, valleys, mountains, oceans as deities. So you can find, see, Imam Me Gange Yamune Saraswati Purushniya Ajikiya, etc. All these mantras. 10 rivers are mentioned in this sukta. 10 rivers means most of the rivers flowing through the west, through Punjab region and towards the east. I am not going to those details. And then at another stage, there is reference to a supreme immanent principle behind all these natural phenomena. So sometimes rivers or mountains and valleys are referred to as the external expressions of an immanent reality. At the third stage, it is called pantheism. The first one is pantheism, second is pantheism. And at another stage, all these natural phenomena are addressed as deities, gods and goddesses. Indra Suktam, Varuna Suktam, etc. Altogether, as I said, there are more than 1,000 odd suktas. 250 suktas are related to Indra. So Indra is a prominent deity in this ancient work. Agni, Varuna and so on. So there is also polytheism. And then there is also monotheism. So there are many suktas, many hymns where the Rigvedic sages speak of one supreme deity, God, who is a controller of all other gods and goddesses, very similar to the Abrahamic concept of monotheism. And there are other mantras which are related to henotheism. I am not going to those details, but I am coming to another point now related to Vedanta. At a still higher level, there is a reference to one supreme reality which we cannot define, which we cannot explain, which can only be experienced, which is the immanent principle in all living beings, which is omnipresent, which is all-pervading, which is also transcendent. So you find one of the famous suktas, Nasadiya Suktam. There is a statement, the ancient sages, in their search for ultimate reality, they looked outside, but they could not discover the supreme reality in the external world. Then they turned their investigation inward, and then they found the reality whom they were searching for, the absolute reality whom they were searching for, is actually immanent, the indweller in themselves. Sato Bandhum Asadi Niravindan Hridi Pradesha Kavayo Manisha. That's how Rigvedi Nasadi Sukta ends in the 10th mandala. So the ancient sages were looking for the final cause, the origin of the universe, the ultimate reality, the meaning of human existence. And then they found they could never find this reality in the external world. The investigator found himself to be non-distinct and non-different from the object of investigation. Ultimately, when they turned the investigation inward, they found that reality is the indweller, the immanent principle existing within themselves. And again, the one mantra which you find in Mundagopanishad, though Mundagopanishad actually belongs to Atharvaveda tradition, the mantra comes, it appears in Rigveda Samhita. Yadha nadya syandamana samudre abstangachandi namarupe vikhaya tadha vidwan namaruvat vimuktaha paradparam purusham upayadi divyam. It's actually a Rig mantra from Rigveda Samhita. From Rigveda Samhita, all these mantras are put in so many other Upanishads and Samhitas and so on, Aranyak and so on. There says, different rivers flow towards the ocean. When a river flows towards the ocean, before it reaches the ocean, you can call it a name. Missouri, Mississippi, Ganga, Sindhu, whatever it is. But when the river merges with the ocean, when it becomes one with the ocean, its name and form vanish because it becomes one with the ocean. Similarly, when we reach the ultimate goal of spiritual inquiry, we become silent because the investigator ultimately discovers that what he was searching for really exists within himself as the indwelling, the immanent principle. So you can find on the one hand a very solid, harmonious way of social life, family life. The highest values of family life you can find in the Vedic literature, which are perhaps more relevant today than in ancient times, especially Matrudevo Bhava, Pitudevo Bhava, etc. The instructions given in a convocation address, the Vedam Anuchya Acharya and Devasina Manishas. That's how it begins. After completing the instruction, the teacher addresses the students. And then these instructions are laid out, which are of practical value in family life, even in modern times. And at the same time, there are also graphic descriptions of the ultimate reality. And it comes to the conclusion that the ultimate reality, the highest idea of God that a person can conceive of is this. That reality is not one who creates this world and stands apart, supervising this world. But rather, that reality is the immanent principle, which is present everywhere, which is immanent, omnipresent, omniscient, and also transcendent. So, Swami Vivekananda says, according to Swami, he says, the highest criterion for moral action, the highest ethical philosophy is the ideal of oneness of existence. The idea was first conceived in Rigveda Samhita. Swamiji says, the infinite oneness of the soul is the eternal sanction of all morality, all ethics, all good actions. Existence is one, the humanity is one, single spiritual family. So we can't do harm to anyone because we'll be hurting ourselves by doing harm to another person. So all these highest Advaitic ideas actually originated from Rigveda Samhita. Though Rigveda Samhita itself is traditionally known as a book related to ritualism, these Samhita mantras themselves appear in one way or other in many Upanishads. And when these mantras are interpreted by the great Adi Shankaracharya, he interprets them in the highest Advaitic language. So we have already covered our time. I have tried to give a very, very brief, rather superficial introduction to Vedic literature. Just a few ideas in some other occasion. I shall try to go deeper into the subject. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om. That's Sri Ramakrishna Order.